Drage kolegice i kolege, poštovani gosti, dragi naši tim igrači iz tehnike, dobar dan, dobrodošli, srdačno vas pozdravljam u ime Udruge Hrvatskih putničkih agencija. Moje ime je Neda Lušić, ja ću biti danas vaša domaćica, brižna kolegica, što god da vam bude trebalo. U ovom najavnom dijelu samo ću vas podsjetiti na raspored kakav danas imamo i detalje koji će vam bitni za radni dio današnje radionice. Ovo je druga radionica u serijalu od 4 ukupno radionice koje smo mi pripremili uz 100% podršku turističke zajednice Splitsko-dalmatinske županije. To je zapravo i nastavak naše dugogodišnje uspješne suradnje u području edukacije javnog i privatnog sektora, čiji je osnovni cilj, znači strateški cilj oko kojeg smo se okupili sa Joškom Stelom i njegovim timom unazad više od 10 godina, da izgradimo vlastite kapacitete, da izgradimo svoja znanja, iskustva i vještine kako bismo bili konkurentni na međunarodnom turističkom tržištu. To je ujedno zapravo naš napor da izgradimo i potaknemo razvoj turizma u Hrvatskoj na kvalitetan, učinkovit i inovativan način. Stoga je zapravo ovaj serijal u svom glavnom naslovu sadržavao i sadrži inovativni pristup turizmu i njegovom razvoju. Današnja radionica, koja je također predavač naš uvaženi gost, gospodin Holmes iz SAD-a, bavit će se content marketingom, strateškom komunikacijom, ali u fokusu svega toga u okolnostima pandemije osobit naglasak će biti kako to napraviti na održiv i odgovoran način. Što se tiče rasporeda, znači malo uvijek kasnimo, naravno i zbog tehnike, i malo pričekamo naše kolegice i kolege. Počinjemo znači u 10. Prvi blok traje 90 minuta, a nakon toga dajemo jednu dužu pauzu gdje ćete se vi moći međusobno družiti, osvježiti, družiti se s predavačem i onda bismo nastavili u 12:30 i završetak bi bio oko 2 sata. Po epidemiološkim mjerama, znači ono što nas je razveselilo naročito, to je da nemamo više potrebu za COVID potvrdama, ali vas lijepo molim da cijelo vrijeme budete maksimalno odgovorni prema sebi, znači držite se onih osnovnih mjera opreza što se tiče zdravlja. Nadamo se da će ta nevolja uskoro u potpunosti nestati i da ćemo se nalaziti u daleko većem broju slučajeva ovako uživo. Zaista velika hvala Jošku koji nam je omogućio da zaista ovu suradnju ostvarimo uživo. Ovaj radionica kao i one koje će uslijediti sljedeći tjedan sa gospodinom Željkom Treznerom, a završiti sa predavačicom Viki Smith, će biti live streamani, znači one kolegice i kolege koji su iz poslovnih razloga ili nekih drugih razloga nisu mogli nama pridružiti danas fizički, s nama su zapravo u eteru u live streamu i njima također srdačna dobrodošlica i nadam se da ćete se u što većem broju odazvati i na naše sljedeće radionice koje su 11. odnosno 14. travnja. Evo, toliko za danas od mene na početku. Naravno, cijelo vrijeme sam vama na raspolaganju i želim vam ugodan, plodonosan i kreativan radionički dan u hotelu Park s Rob Holmesom. Hvala.
Okay. I understood all of that. Well, nice to see some familiar faces and some new faces today, so thank you for coming out. I'll jump here to this first slide. So for those of you that don't know, I'm from the US, some new folks here, and my company is a content marketing agency, and we specialize in tourism and then have a real passion and commitment to sustainability. I'll be talking about that today and this sort of theme. The theme for today, yesterday was content marketing and more storytelling, and today I'll really dive into the destination management, sustainability, and communications. Actually, I'll summarize that. So this is where we were yesterday. But as I said yesterday, if you have any questions, more questions came out later in the day. People raised their hands. So please interrupt me. I'm here to help, inspire, and in any way. We'll have some breakout sessions here. Actually, I'll shift this one back. But anyway, I'll just jump right in. So what better than to start off with a simple story? So I showed yesterday when the pandemic hit, our team put together what we called a Tourism Strong campaign. It was really to help the industry to share best practices both in resiliency and how to get through this first-in-a-lifetime experience of COVID-19. And so we shared stories from around the world, people we've worked with in over 13 countries. It was about 25 different stories, all filmed from my house, my interview through Skype with people, and then getting footage from them just to really help put together their story. And they're all short pieces, all about 2 minutes each. This is one from very dear friends of mine, Jorge and Maria. I actually, on a scouting trip down to Ecuador, stayed with them at their house, and their 2 daughters and son, who was just born, and we've known each other for a long time. So it's a very rough video. It's just simple. It's just from their house, but it's real. It's what we went through 2 years ago now. In this, again, something we've never experienced. And this will give you a sense for them, their passion and commitment to sustainability, to regenerative tourism, to transformational tourism, you know, all these buzzwords, but really just, in my opinion, it's about caring for the industry and caring about the impact tourism has on local community, culture, heritage, etc. So that's really, a lot of these words and buzzwords gets confusing. But anyway, so just enjoy this short little video on their perspective. Can you turn it up just a little? Yeah. Just. Just one little moment in there. Again, I know Maria, Jose, and Jorge very well. At one point, she's talking and he's on his phone. You know, it's just like, keep going, keep going. They never stop. And again, it's a real inspiration just knowing people like that in the industry are so passionate and committed to what they do. So today's agenda, I'll just throw this up here. I'll talk about sustainable tourism, and then what is regenerative tourism? Any people know what regenerative tourism? Okay, so again, it's something that you might, those really active in tourism, you might be a little more aware of it. Again, I'll just give a simple explanation on what it is. And then getting into destination management. You know, it's always been about marketing, 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 and things are now changing. Destinations around the world are realizing that tourism needs to change. It can't just be about marketing. That you need to really have more of a management approach for long term. And then looking at sustainable tourism and sort of 4 steps, 4 components of it on the marketing side, and then looking at distribution. So you can have the best content, videos, whatever it is, but unless you have a very smart and strategic distribution plan, marketing plan, you know, it's going to be tough. So the marketing plays an important role. So destination management, I mentioned some of this yesterday, and I just said it again, you know, really a lot of destinations globally, and I would say Dubrovnik is a good example. It's too many tourists, too many people, and that's had an impact on the local community, impact on the environment, the culture, the social environment. I'm sure many of you are aware, but it also impacts the traveler experience, which is why we're in the industry, which is why you know, we want to provide these amazing and unique and authentic traveler experiences. But when you're just jamming in as many people as you can into a tight space, it's going to have impacts. And I think, and I've got some examples of destinations that are really pivoting because they have to, and they want to, too. So this push on growth, again, it's all over the world. It's pretty well known now. I mean, these destinations, Thailand, you know, closed a number of beaches. Iceland, I'll talk about it in a second. Amsterdam, I was there a couple of years ago. You know, again, just iconic travel destinations that, you know, Machu Picchu, we filmed in Machu Picchu years ago, and we were there at sunrise, and it was absolutely packed. You know, sunrise, 6 o'clock. I've been in places where there's just, you know, 4:30 in the morning looking for sunrise in eastern Indonesia on a volcano, Mount Bromo. And it was unbelievable how many people were there at 4:30 in the morning. You know, like, did you guys sleep? But anyway, but I will say if there's one lesson, and I could talk about it a lot, but just how the pandemic, it changed all of us. It really, and I think that appreciation of nature and the appreciation of the outdoors, I mentioned it yesterday, the appreciation of community and what tourism is and the impact and role we want to take tourism. And so this strategy of build back better and making tourism better, I think is only a good thing. And seeing, you know, terms like regenerative popping up, you know, again, they really weren't on the map, didn't have our attention before COVID. So it really gave us that time to pause and reflect on what we're doing in tourism. So sustainable tourism, I'll throw these points up here. You know, I'll look at sustainability. Sustainability used to be the environmental impacts our business would having, reducing water, reducing energy, you know, our environmental footprint. And that was really the birthplace of when we started hearing about about sustainability was, you know, lighten our impact, which is a good thing. It's now evolved, you know, and we talk about people, planet, and prosperity, you know, the economy and local people, but sustainability for me is expanded so far beyond these pillars and what it is. But now it's become more, at least from the United States perspective, sustainability is now about community. It's about inclusiveness. It's about diversity. You know, we talked about it. I mentioned it yesterday, just where tourism is going now. It means so much more now of what really, if you're going to be sustainable. On the traveler's perspective, I mentioned this, and I'll have some more examples today. It's what travelers want. Travelers want this unique, authentic, immersive experience that's having a light impact, knowing their dollars are going to go to local communities and support. I showed some numbers yesterday, some statistics about that, you know, seeing these trends that people want to make sure their dollars go to local communities and help. And there are a lot of really good strategies, and I'll talk about some of them today, of where sustainability is now saying, okay, how can we do tourism better? You know, travel in the off-season, spread out of the major cities, you know, go see the cities if you need to, but then go somewhere else. And I'll have some examples of dispersal. So there's really some exciting, I mean, tourism, in my opinion, over the last 2 years has totally innovated, totally changed in a lot of great ways. Yeah, I'm sure a lot of old tourism will come back as pandemic, you know, drops now. But I think there's also the opportunity, and this opportunity for change will continue. It's had a profound effect. And So sustainability, I like to also, I think it's important to look at some statistics. And these are coming from booking.com just last year. And they're pretty well-known numbers and stats out there. 83% of travelers think sustainable travel is vital. You know, again, that change in mindset. And throw up these other two. 76% want to ensure the economic impact of the industry is spread equally across all levels of society. You know, and then lastly, 69% are willing to avoid popular destinations. Like I said yesterday, you would not see these numbers 2 years ago. And that's really the impact, and I see the opportunity of doing tourism different and really leveraging this wonderful momentum and I think appreciation that people have on tourism. A good friend of mine, Anna Pollock, really well known, she's from the UK. I love this quote: regenerative tourism defines success as more net benefit while providing a great and richer sense of meaning for guests and hosts. There can be no such thing as sustainable business within an unsustainable system. So you can have all this change, but if you don't change the foundation, it's really going to be challenging. I don't say a waste of time, but it's, you know, really you have to transform top bottom in order to really have an impact. And there's just so much perspective now, I think, and appreciation for what tourism is. So looking at some of these bases of what is regenerative tourism, how I like to simply explain regenerative is sustainability was, at least in the United States, there's a term, leave no trace. You go to a location and you leave light impact, you know, sort of cover up your footprints when you leave. You don't have an impact, and it's tread lightly. These type of terms that people use. With regenerative, you go to a destination and you almost leave it better after you leave. Helping, getting involved, you know, the old term of volunteerism, you know, helping out, projects you can do. Now you can see regenerative projects all around the world where there's farm stays, where there's helping out on different projects within a community. The example I'll show you today in the work we just did in Sedona, Arizona, it is about people getting involved and helping out. And there's so many great examples. I think it was the Faroe Islands did a whole campaign, if I'm remembering, I think it's the Faroe Islands, where people would basically apply to come and help the Faroe Islands rebuild their roads, and they literally shut down the islands during a set period of time. This is back in May. They do it every year, and people would come and volunteer their time, help out, rebuild the trails, and do this work. I mean, you would never have thought of this years ago. So people wanting to totally change how we connect to tourism. So designing, so when you look at tourism, designing with nature in mind, making nature part of the experience. Supply chain, involving all the stakeholders, everyone, again, being inclusive of all the different groups when looking at tourism. This transformational experience, what Jorge and Maria Jose and Jorge talked about in their short story, you know, this transformational experience, not just health and wellness, but how you change the body and mind through this. So, and then, as I mentioned earlier, inclusive, you know, this inclusiveness of communities, and I'll talk about stakeholder development. But ultimately, it is about changing mindsets, and it is about just shifting our approach and how we look at impact in tourism. So this shift to destination management, I think a big part of it is looking at, I mean, I mentioned earlier, and we've all heard, looking at numbers, growth at all costs, heads and beds, and really it's about, okay, what is success in tourism? And this is really the shift from destination marketing to destination management, and looking at what are those measures. And again, it's pretty innovative when you look at the opportunity that tourism has, getting community impact. What is the quality of life for the local residents? You know, a lot of studies have been done on the town of, or the city of Venice. You know, we all know. I mean, they cut back on the cruise ships finally after so much pressure. You know, the residents, you know, local resident population has dropped tremendously there. I'm in a town in Maine where, that you're seeing locals, they're just being forced out because they can't afford to live in a place now because it's all being owned. We all know these examples around the world where the town's being bought up by outsiders. So, really seeing, okay, if we're going to have tourism in this area, how are we going to impact? How are we going to protect the nature, the culture, the heritage? Looking at these regenerative principles, and then yesterday I mentioned the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and these standards. So there's just so much depth that we can do in tourism and how it can make an impact. And I will say the example I'll show you this morning on destination management and stewardship. Stewardship is another great term of how do we take care, how do we become a steward of our local environment and really help everyone together and do our part to give back and help the local economy. So it is really all about changing what the definition of success is and what those metrics are. So I'll show you 3 different examples. Hawaii is a great example. There's been a lot of articles that came out just this past year and a half on Hawaii. It's a cultural paradise that people, I think, really didn't appreciate, at least as an American and someone who's traveled there a handful of times. The cultural traditions there are amazing, but most people see it as a beach and sun destination, beach and hotel. Go there, hang out at a resort, and then, head back. And people forget this amazing cultural experience, the local communities, the indigenous communities that have been there for forever. And I think that's been the eye-opening change, and that's where the Hawaii Tourism Authority launched, because they really felt they had to, a regenerative tourism initiative really supporting the local community. So when people come in, a portion of their hotel, their airplane ticket, that money is now going to local communities, going to education, going to social programs, going to cultural programs to help locals. A big emphasis to the local community. And really just, I think, getting away from the stigma of Hawaii is a resort. Well, it's not. I mean, all these resorts and this development happened, but you have this amazing local culture and communities that were really significantly impacted. And so Hawaii has really done a really good job in saying, look, we need to support the local communities. We need to support our culture, our heritage, and our indigenous traditions. And so things are moving in a really good direction. Again, I could talk a lot more about Hawaii. It's become a hot button topic in the U.S. Another destination, Iceland. I went to Iceland and spoke at a conference years ago, and I'll never forget leaving the airport. It was like a cattle corral, just so many people trying to squeeze into the terminal and catch your flight. So Iceland, over the years has really exploded in tourism, and it has become a poster child for over-tourism. Just too many people. There's the ring road that goes around the capital, and that everyone does. And I went up in the conference. Fortunately, it was in the north, so we got away from Reykjavik. But what they've done just simply is, you can see here, spending 40% on infrastructure and parks, creating other places, other ring roads, so people had other options to go. And that's the issue. You need to spread people out to go to different areas. It's not saying don't come. It's saying we need to change our infrastructure. And they realized they just couldn't handle the demand and the tourists. And also, too, a lot of destinations you're seeing, and it's debatable on this, too, but shifting to more high value or high they call it high value tourists, people that will spend more money and stay longer. Obviously, I think in any tourist destination, you want people to stay as long as possible. And now saying, okay, let's see if we can get people that will spend a little more money and contribute to the local economy. So they're definitely doing some big initiatives to try to change and make Iceland the experience. Because my experience, I'll never forget leaving. I mean, granted, I'm at the airport. The waterfalls and the other places we went to wasn't that bad until the tour buses showed up, and then it was like a flood of people. But so it's almost like you want to stay ahead of the buses when you're traveling around. And then lastly, New Zealand, and many of you probably know this campaign just celebrated, I mean, they're not running it now, but they're 100% pure New Zealand. It ran for 10 years. It was one of the most successful marketing campaigns ever. And I remember just seeing it at FITR and ITB and all the trade shows, you know, the big 100% pure, great marketing. And I think they really realized now, with this perspective of COVID, that it wasn't 100% pure, meaning it was just marketing, and they weren't really looking at, okay, we're driving all these people to the destination. Their infrastructure wasn't set up. They didn't have the infrastructure to support it. And so then suddenly they're suffering from over-tourism. Local indigenous communities, the Maoris and others are struggling. Just too many people. I mean, it was just, and there's a million case studies on really successful marketing that has its downside. So in 2020, they mandated now every regional DMO in New Zealand now is required to have a destination management plan. So they totally changed from marketing to management, and it was mandated, you know, across the entire country. So a big shift. And then they also have had this popular Try Something New campaign, which again is getting people away, tourists away from hashtagging very specific waterfalls. Again, you've heard of Justin Bieber going to Iceland and hashtagging a waterfall, and then the whole world now knows about this waterfall. You know, there's a lot of examples of this. But making this shift to regenerative, where it's getting thorough, it's getting deep, and really making people aware of their impact. And because ultimately this environmental impact, cultural impact, has its downsides. So this is the first breakout we'll have today. And I think we've got two this morning session just to kick things off. And this is really, you're in 4 different tables essentially. We did it yesterday, so for those that are new, just jump in. But I thought it would be good to look at, in your opinion, and just talk as a group, what do you see as destination management in Croatia? Is it happening in any different locations? Is it happening in Split? Is it happening in other places? So what is destination management here? And I thought it might be an interesting discussion to have in your different groups of what does that mean here locally? Are some of the things that I briefly mentioned dispersal? Is it actually happening and where? Off-season travel. You know, I use the example of my wife and I going to Ireland in the month of November, where no one ever goes to Ireland in November. It's cold, it's wet, it's rainy, but we had a great experience despite the rain. And so where are some of these examples of stewardship, of conservation are really happening? What are some of the success stories? And then what sectors, you know, if it's hospitality, if it's operators, you know, destinations, are doing leadership in sustainability and regenerative? I mean, it's going to be happening somewhere. There are some good nuggets out there. And so I thought it would be good just to have that discussion and then have you talk for 5-6 minutes or so. And then if one person can just represent and just rattle off some examples, I'm just curious to see where some of the leadership might be happening in Croatia. Go ahead. Oh, sure. No, you can just talk about it as a group. No. Oh.
Do we have to talk about it from the perspective of EMOs, like sport, or like a platform?
Yeah, I think I wanted to keep this open. You can talk about it however perspective